as the air is beautiful, as the fall comes around, as we talk football, baseball is coming to an end. We have a month and a half before the playoffs. The two things that really stand out from two of the baseball teams before we get into Fernando Tatis is the Yankees made the most moves for both New York teams at the trade deadline. Everybody thought the Mets were going to do that. The Mets stayed put. They added a good hitter in Voldembeck. Big, fat, and can hit. That's for sure. And then they add a left-handed powerhouse over there on the other side who can hit lefties. You look at what the Mets did so far at the trade deadline, every Met fan was upset. What are they doing? What is this organization doing? They've got all the money in the world. Steve Cohen likes to spend money. Why didn't they go after a Soto? Which they tried to, but it didn't happen. Why did they go after a Benintendi? Why did they go after a star relief pitcher like Hader? But the Mets stayed put. They didn't go after J.D. Martinez. That looks like crap. They stayed put because they believe in their pitching, Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom. They believe they can beat anybody in any team in baseball when they have those two horses on the mound. And they were right. Because since the All-Star break, the Mets have been one of the top two record teams in the MLB. They have won just as many games as the Yankees and the Red Sox have since the All-Star break together. That tells you how good the Mets are playing. Now, this weekend, they're playing the Phillies. They lost Friday against the Phillies in extra innings. The Phillies are playing great baseball. And the Phillies can make the playoffs. They really could. And they could be a dangerous team. They really could because maybe their bullpen has gotten a little bit better. They added Houdini.
It can't get much worse than it was in the beginning of the season.
I look at where the Yankees are. I wonder what the Yankees are as an organization, how this organization is going to move forward for where they are and where they're positioned, what they can do this season. Aaron Judge having the season that he's had, an MVP season, adding Montas, adding Benintendi, adding all these pieces. You're thinking that this team was going to go on a run where they're going to win 119 games, 120 games, and be one of the greatest teams in Yankee history. They've fallen apart. They're injured. Some of their players have not really stood out to be the players that we thought they were going to be going into the second half. Anthony Rizzo's back, but he's hitting .225 even with 27 home runs and 60-some RBIs. Aaron Judge, he's hot as hell. He's the only one that's hot. But you can't win when one player is hot. And you wonder what's going on with this bullpen. Holmes has been horrible. What's going on with this rotation? Montez, his first game as a Yankee, horrible. You wonder if this organization is positioned to win going into the playoffs. I'm lost with words with the Yankees.
The hitting approach right now is going back to their old flaws from before, where the Yankees are trying to go all or nothing in certain points, and it seems like Aaron Judge is the only one carrying them, and we've seen stretches of that in the past, and that has not done well in the playoffs. That has not done well in certain stretches for as potent as the Yankees offense always looks on paper, and that's a big concern as it is. The bullpen, we didn't expect it to last like it was the first 2 months of the season for the entire season, but it definitely is concerning when you're seeing a lot of their top relievers all of a sudden look out of whack, like they're out of position, and they're not being able to adjust well. And for a modern bullpen, you have to be able to do well in other roles, too. The starters, I think it was expected for Cortez to level out. It was expected for Garrett Cole to bounce back after he had that rough patch, and he's had a great start against Seattle, even though they lost that game. Also, the Yankees' late game hitting has started to really falter where it was in the beginning of the season. Very, very strong, and that'll make a difference when it comes to October. The Yankees are losing a lot of close games. I heard yesterday that the Yankees are now tied for the most walk-off losses this year, too. So that's definitely concerning from where they were in the beginning of the season.
They've won the most, and they've lost the most.
Yeah, but still, that's also concerning where you look at the bullpen where it was and the situational hitting where it was in the beginning of the season.
The alarming thing about the Yankees is Holmes. That's the alarming thing. He was one of the best closers. He was one of the best relief pitchers in baseball throughout the season. And now all of a sudden, since the second half, he's bombed 3 games. He's given up runs in the last 3 times in the last 3 games that the Yankees have brought him in. So if you're sitting here today, that's the thing that's alarming to the Yankees because you lost King for the season. Besides Holmes, he was your second best relief pitcher. Now you don't have King anymore. Holmes looks like he's got his head up his ass. What are the Yankees going to do? And Loizaga hasn't been the same since he's been back. Chapman hasn't been the same since he's coming back. You can only hope that when Zack Britton comes back, he is the player that we remember when he came to the Yankees. So right now, you can't be happy if you're a New York Yankee fan.
Yeah, I was just going to mention Chapman, too, and it might come to the point where you're going to have to try to rebirth him into what he was, and that might be difficult, and same thing, kind of thing with Britton. If he does come back, will he come back the same? Now, you were saying on the Sports Lab Mouse he was pitching kind of injured last year, so he wasn't the same peak form and definitely did not look it, but Zack Britton might have to have a different pitching style in order for him to be effective again. As far as the Mets, yeah, what we thought as more small-scale trade deadline acquisitions have hit well. Daniel Vogelbach, spiritual leader, home runs, getting on base a lot, and for a guy that normally strikes out a lot, isn't striking out as much as I thought he would, and Tyler Naquin, too, another nice acquisition, and the Mets have really done an interesting transformation where they've done different hitters rather than just sticking with what they have, which you don't normally see all at once. Now, they're pitching, they're going to have to rely a lot on the starters down the road, and postseason, it'll be very interesting if that strategy ends up working, because the Mets are going to kind of have to do more of an old school approach because of that, too. Now, we've seen teams with questionable bullpens on paper still look good in the postseason in recent years. We saw that with the Red Sox when they won in 2018. We saw that with the Nationals in 2019. The Cubs, their bullpen wasn't bad when they won, but it wasn't their strength. And Joe Madden kind of started that trend where you don't need to have this great bullpen on paper to make it work. So Buck Showalter is going to have to do a little bit of that in order to make it work. But if they get all those starters healthy, they could definitely use some of those guys out of the pen. So it'll be interesting to see what they do going forward. I still wouldn't favor them as the favorite coming out of the National League, but they're still in the top 3 at the moment.
And then there's Fernando Tatis, who everybody thought was coming back. You added Juan Soto. You have Machado there. You have your triple threat right there. Your 3 unbelievable top-end hitters, all of them going to make over $300 million. Soto being probably the first $500 million player in the league. And then you hear yesterday that the Major League is suspended Tatis for 80 games, which that will be the rest of the season.
Yep.
And probably a little bit next season as well. So he's out until next season. And if you sit here today and you wonder what Tatis was before this, nobody knows. Maybe he's been doing this since the beginning. That means he got a $300 million contract, and we don't even know how good he really was. And maybe he thought he was going to hide this lotion. It wasn't going to appear in his drug tests because everybody gets a drug test. He obviously had one when he was sitting out, relaxing, and enjoying his rehabilitation. But then you're hearing that he took this lotion for ringworm. He didn't know there was steroids in it. Are you kidding me? Come on. You sound like Mark McGwire. You sound like Barry Bonds. This is what they said. Again, I believe that athletes, as long as they're not boxers or MMA fighters or combat sports, everybody, if they want to use steroids, they should be allowed to. It doesn't make you see the ball better. Maybe it gives you a little bit more power. It doesn't matter. Steroids have been around forever. Amphetamines have been around since the 60s, the 50s. They were getting away with it. A lot of them are in the Hall of Fame. So why is baseball making this a big deal? But right now, it is a big deal because of the steroid era, because of Mark McGwire and Palmeiro and Sammy Sosa and Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens. And do you want to go more? Cam Caminiti. We could go up and down. David Ortiz, who's in the Hall of Fame. Figure that one out. Manny Ramirez, Alex Rodriguez, some of the greats. But Fernando Tatis, and I call him Tatis, memorize what I'm saying, Tatis, and just kind of mimic what I'm trying to get there. He is an idiot. He is a dumb athlete who thought that he can outsmart the MLB, outsmart a drug test, and then have the audacity to come out and say that he was using the lotion to kill ringworm, when you could go into CVS right now and get a lotion right there. What is he talking about? I mean, could you be that dumb? It's like boxers saying that they were eating steak and it had steroids in it, okay? There's a Mexican fighter that everybody knows, the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world at one point, Canelo Alvarez, that when he was caught with steroids, he said, I don't know. I was eating a lot of steak, and the steak might have had a lot of steroids in it. What do you think, we're stupid? The amount of steroids they found in his blood, not any cow could have lived through it.
So you're saying the cows weren't taking the steroids? Aw, I was looking for that plot twist. That would have been great. But yeah, everything you just said about Tatis is pretty accurate when it comes to the way that they test for these things now. I go back to just 4 years ago. Eventual Mets bum, Robinson Cano, and Yankees legend. Robinson Cano had something similar. Not for the Yankee standard.
He would have been a Hall of Famer.
Nevertheless, all the drugs that he said, I wasn't doing, all these foreign substances that he wasn't taking when he was in the Dominican Republic.
He was hanging out with Alex.
Yeah, and your career hasn't been the same since then. And Fernando Tatis, hopefully you're young enough to not have that hinder your entire career, but still, that's not a good look.
He will not be a Padre very long. Unless somebody wants him. If he comes back and he plays a little, they're going to get rid of him. They'll sign Soto, they'll keep Soto, and they're going to have to move on from Tatis because he's going to get ridiculed.
Definitely a bad look, though, when you're seeing all these guys get caught. All the substances last year, all the new substances that are on the list. I'm not saying you have to memorize the list, but just be careful with what you're taking when it comes to these kinds of things. Look up what cloth the ball is. Look up what this ringworm thing is. All these other substances. You have the money, obviously. You just got paid a big contract, $300 million contract. You should be able to afford that kind of thing. You should be able to research something that is going to heal an injury. Just know about this kind of thing. Your team is making all these trade deadline splashes, one of the best teams in baseball. Why would you risk that kind of thing? Come on, man. You got to be better than that.